Good morning, friends. Welcome to Evolve 2020, empowering L&D superheroes to support their remote workforce. My name is Rahul, and I'll be your host for today. This micro-webinar series is brought to you by Harbinger Interactive Learning. Harbinger Interactive Learning is a global design and development company specializing in helping organizations migrate their classroom-based trainings into virtual and digital formats. Harbinger Interactive Learning has over 30 years of experience in delivering innovative learning solutions for various industry verticals. For more information, please log on to harbingerlearning.com. Today is the third episode in this micro-webinar series, and we are going to talk about 10 cool tips for delivering effective virtual instructor-led training sessions using web meeting apps. And with that, now let us welcome our guest for today's episode. We have Neville Postwala with us. Neville heads the talent management at Harbinger Interactive Learning. Good morning, Neville. Welcome to Evolve 2020.
Hey, Rahul. Good morning. It's great to be here on Evolve 2020. Thank you for inviting me.
The pleasure is all mine, Neville. So, Neville, we have been working together for quite a few years now, and I know a lot about you. But for our audience who have joined this micro-webinar, would you please share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I've been working with Harbinger for about 6 years now, and in all, I think I have around 20 years of experience in the HR field. I love studying about the way HR is going to evolve in the future, and because of the lockdown, I'm seeing so many of these predictions actually coming true. It's in real life. It's so interesting. That's a little bit about work, but apart from work, I love acting, and I've acted in quite a few plays in my city, Pune, which is in India, as well as a couple of plays in Mumbai. So I just love being on stage. Yeah, and of course, I'm a foodie, so anything that comes my way, I love to sample it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Neville. And we do have, a stage for you today, so we'll be looking forward to, from you. All right. So, so now, friends, I think it's time to put on our capes.
Yeah, I think in the pandemic era, I mean, HR folks are the ones who need to have their capes on all the time because we looked at superheroes.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you. All right, so now coming to our topic today, Neville, please tell us about some of those cool tips that we can use while using these web meeting apps, because in these days, a lot of us are delivering training sessions, conducting sessions using these web meeting apps. So, if you could, just give us some insights around that.
Yeah, sure, Rahul. I'm going to specifically talk about some tips that could come in handy using a web app. And if you'd like, I'd like to go with Zoom because that's what I'm comfortable with. So are you okay with that?
Oh, yes, absolutely, Neville. Zoom. In fact, it seems that that's quite a popular one these days, even though it was popular earlier, but with this pandemic situation, it has, become popular. So, Neville, to start with, if you don't mind, I wanted to, try and understand that. Give some tips on how to put a face to the voice in all these virtual sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something really important. I would kind of highly recommend that we try to put on our videos on when we're on a web meeting. Sometimes it may not be possible for you to put your video whenever possible, but whenever possible, do that. But it doesn't matter if you've not had a haircut for a long time, but go ahead and put on that video because it basically helps build a very strong, connect with the audience. You'd be intrigued to know that you can actually make great eye contact during the web meeting as well. So that's one. The second one is, I think, creating an ambience. So make sure the place where you're sitting, has good lights around, it's well illuminated. There aren't too many distractions in the background. Yeah, I mean, since all of us are working from home, it can be a challenge, but try to do your best, especially to remove background sounds. And sometimes you may get caught in a situation where you just kind of avoid the distractions. So you can go ahead and actually customize your background. That's a cool feature that Zoom has. You just simply need to go to the settings section of Zoom And you can actually just change your background by picking one of the preloaded ones, or you can use, one of the custom ones. So the picture that you see of me right now is actually a background that I've actually uploaded from my laptop.
That's wonderful. This was a good one, Neville. Uh, Neville, recently there was a lot of talk about in the press. I was reading about it that about these web meeting apps not being secure.
Mm-hmm.
For our audience, do you have any tips as to how we can create a safe virtual meeting place using Zoom in particular?
Yeah, sure. I think in Zoom, there are a bunch of features which actually enable you to create, a kind of safe meeting place. I'll talk about 3 or 4 of them that come to mind. Um, the first one I think is you got to have a strong meeting password feature enabled. So it really helps people to enter the password before they get into the meeting room. And I think that adds, the first layer of security. So that's one. I think Zoom also has a waiting room where all participants can gather before your meeting starts. And then, once you allow them, they can go and lock the room. So I think in this way, you can avoid any unwanted guests. So, locking the room is an important feature, that so that no one can, bomb your meeting. I think there's a term that they use, which is Zoom bombing for unauthorized people getting into your meeting. So if you kind of lock your meeting, I think you're really protecting yourself from Zoom bombing. And I think another important point is, as an organizer of the meeting, you also have the option of disabling the chat and the video functionality of the participants. So that can also come in safety, in security when you're using Zoom.
Right.
Let me just add a little bit about recording the session, if you're okay with that, Rahul.
Yeah, sure, Neville, please.
So, one simple option to record is just click on the record button on your main screen. But, if you want to get into a very specific kind of recording, you go to the setting options, and there you can select exactly what you want to record. There are various options that Zoom has. You can record only audio, only chat, audio, video. There are multiple options. So whatever you want, you can go ahead and choose. One tip that I found kind of useful is in the session that I have conducted in the past, I've noticed that sometimes I'm kind of enthusiastic to start the session off. And unfortunately, at times I've forgotten to record a session. So now what I actually do is I set a timer on my mobile phone for about 5 minutes. And when it goes off, if the session is not started, I keep on extending that timer for a minute or so. And eventually when the beeper goes off, it's a reminder for me to start recording the session. And I think since I've started using this little tip of mine, I've never missed a recording session.
Right, that's wonderful, Neville. And this is interesting. I wasn't aware of this fact that there are so many recording options available in Zoom. I thought you just have to hit the recording button and it does the rest. But this is cool. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, there are many things, Rahul, which a lot of us are unaware about Zoom. But I think the present situation is kind of helping us learn things constantly. There's another feature that I learned about recently, and that's a cool hack. You can actually use the space bar to mute or unmute yourself during meetings. So, earlier when I used to be in group meetings and I wanted to speak, I literally had to kind of scramble to find the unmute button. But now I just hit the space bar, I unmute myself immediately. I think it's a more efficient way of doing that.
Right. So, Neville, moving ahead, probably if you could just give us any idea, if we are conducting like these group sessions with multiple folks around, are there ways to collaborate during these web meetings like we would do, during our in-person meetings?
Yeah, I mean, there are. Let me just give you one example. So I think on Zoom, you can have a collaborative annotation session. So, these annotation tools let the meeting participants, they can draw, they can highlight what's on screen, so they can kind of emphasize something which they want to. And this is pretty, helpful, especially when people are discussing visual materials such as, maybe a mock-up, graphic design and so forth. So you can actually circle something, you can highlight something, you can make your point very, very clearly. It's pretty easy to do actually, just to annotate while, you're viewing somebody else's screen. Just go to the view option. That's I think on the top of the Zoom window, and there's an annotate button. And then you'll have a toolbar that will pop up with all your options to, to draw text, to put up an arrow, and so on and so forth. So it's really cool and it's very easy to do.
Right. And I think we have one more tip to go from you. So Neville, you're gonna talk a little bit about this name display feature, how we can use it to avoid getting into some awkward situations.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting feature that you can use actually. So, sometimes you may forget the person's name who you're speaking to, especially for a person like me who's in HR. And, sometimes when I'm doing an interview and the name of the person just skips my mind, there's an interesting way in which you can actually get into the video and you can see who the person is using the participant list. So if you forget the person's name, there's always a backup for you, and so that you don't end up, feeling awkward. So yeah, so that's how you can figure out somebody's name, and you can save a little bit of face during a discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the talent management or talent acquisition space, for example, during a virtual onboarding case or interviewing candidates, this feature this tip can come in pretty handy. Thank you. Thank you.
That's true.
Thank you very much, Neville, for sharing these wonderful tips. I'm definitely personally gonna use quite a few of them. And I'm sure the audience would also like to use, some of these tips or most of these tips, if I would say.
Thank you, Rahul. It's been my pleasure being here today and to share my learnings with this community. So I wish everybody all the best. Thank you again.
Thanks, Neville. So we'll just quickly summarize what were those 10 cool tips that Neville provided us today. To start with, use the power of video, switch on that video, avoid distractions in the background. If you can't avoid that, set up an ambience, make sure the lighting is right, put up a background image, personalized or a customized one. Then add layers of security, set up a password for your meeting, create a waiting room, let your attendees, assemble in the waiting room and then let them enter into the actual meeting environment. Keep control on the chat and audio. Use the recording options as required. Remember, there are multiple recording options, not just one. Spacebar, there's one more effective use case of spacebar. You can mute and unmute by hitting the spacebar. Make your meetings collaborative. Use the annotation tool available in Zoom. And name display. If you are not sure that you'll remember all the names of all the attendees in your session, use name display. So this was a summary of these 10 cool tips. And thank you very much to all our L&D community members for joining this micro webinar. We will arrange for the recording session and the presentation deck here. If you have any specific questions or you want to discuss anything in specific with Neville and try and understand how these cool tips or some other cool tips around using web meeting apps like Zoom, please feel free to drop us a line at info@harbingerlearning.com. I'll repeat that for you. It's info@harbingerlearning.com. And before we sign off for today, let me remind you that in our next episode, we'll have another superhero from the L&D community. They'll join us and we'll talk about specifically in terms of how to use these webinar recordings as effective learning resources. So please do join us for that particular session. Till then, see you next week, same day, same time. Stay safe and stay inspired. Thank you.